Be me, 27, stuck working barista shifts where my tips barely cover new shoes and my cold brew habit. Whenever life gets messy, I shrug it off and tell myself, I'll figure it out. Women always do. That's what Mom used to say, back before she packed her bags and left. I never once counted what Dad did as real labor. To me, he was just a man doing his job. In women's studies, I learned men cling to old roles because they're scared of female independence, and I swore I'd never shrink myself into a helper or let a man define my worth. Dad? He's the corner store guy, ran Eagle Mart since before I could spell it. Same store every day for 20 years, same navy polo, same dented thermos. He'd wake up at 5 a.m., shuffle out before sunrise, and I used to roll my eyes watching him lace up his boots. Like, congratulations, you're a cog in capitalism. If he was smarter, he'd have left this grind and done something with himself. Mom always said, men settle while women strive, and I believed her. Every word. He'd come back past dark with his hands cracked and his shirt reeking of fryer oil and coffee grounds. I thought it was pathetic. No ambition, no change, just groceries and gas station snacks. Eagle Mart itself? The hum of coolers, a flickering open sign, handwritten tabs for regulars, a pegboard full of invoices. To me it was cramped, dingy, stuck in the 90s, but somehow it kept the lights on, the fridge stocked, and the bills paid. I rolled my eyes whenever he called it the family business. Like, please, it was chips and lottery tickets, not Wall Street. I'd joke with friends that if a woman ran it, she'd at least rebrand, repaint, make it cute. Men never think about presentation, just survival. Little brother Leo, 10 years old, sweet, anxious, chews his sleeves when nervous. Dad kept his world running, packed his lunch, signed permission slips, paid for math club. If Dad missed one thing, Leo's day unraveled. I'd think any mom could handle this with half the effort. Women juggle work and kids every day, so why did Dad act like packing lunches was noble? I never noticed until later how invisible those details were. But back then, I dismissed it all as bare minimum. Men should do childcare, of course. They don't deserve awards for covering the basics. Mom? Divorced when I was a teen, said she was meant for more than small-town men. Moved 2 states away, sends the occasional text on birthdays. Always said she'd come back for Leo someday, but years passed, and nothing. Dad never badmouthed her, just pretended to work harder, filling the gaps she left behind. I secretly admired Mom for leaving. She refused to rot behind a counter, refused to waste her life on menial work. Sometimes I wondered if I'd do the same. Ditch the grind, chase something bigger. Dad staying behind always looked like weakness to me. I'd stop by Eagle Mart after my shift, pretending it was just for a snack when really it was to hitch a ride home. Dad would be behind the counter, stacking bills with those cracked hands. Leo perched on a stool with his homework spread out, sipping cocoa from the same chipped mug like it was fine dining. Regulars came and went, calling Dad by name, swapping jokes about weather and ball games. I never got it. How he wasted time and patience on nobodies buying scratch-offs and soda. To me, it was all so small, so painfully average. Sometimes he'd slide a $10 bill across the counter, eyes tired but steady. Just in case, he'd say. I'd laugh, call it pocket change, and blow it on takeout before the night was over. That was our rhythm, night after night. Him wiping counters, closing the till, checking the cooler with his little flashlight. Leo fighting sleep against the candy rack, and me, blind to the weight he carried, convinced it all meant nothing. I told myself I deserved better than this. A life bigger than convenience stores and cracked linoleum. Men like Dad were placeholders, not role models. I'd brag to co-workers how I'd never end up like him. Hands cracked, back bent, proud of nothing but a corner mart. They'd nod and say, I was too smart for that life, and I believed them. Then one night, the rhythm broke. Closing shift, lights dimmed, air thick with the smell of fryer oil and dust. Leo half asleep on the counter, cocoa ring drying on his notebook. Dad rubbed his chest with one hand, the other still holding a stack of receipts. He muttered something about heartburn, said he just needed a minute. I barely looked up and told him, Don't be dramatic, we still have to lock up. But his face had gone pale, sweat streaking down his temple. He braced against the counter, knees buckling, receipts slipping from his hand and fluttering to the floor like confetti. Leo sat up, blinking, voice trembling. Dad? I told him to relax, it was nothing, until Dad collapsed, hitting the tile with a thud that rattled the candy jars. I froze, stupid, useless, the open sign still glowing weakly in the window. Leo screamed, scrambling off the counter, clutching Dad's arm, and I fumbled for my phone, fingers shaking, dialing 911. Paramedics came fast, but not fast enough. Ambulance lights painted the storefront red and blue. Leo clung to my arm, hiccuping sobs, asking if Dad would wake up. I stood there numb, nodding like an idiot, scrolling my phone just to keep my hands busy. The paramedics worked frantically, then slowed down, then went quiet. Finally, they zipped him up and loaded him out. Later they'd call it an aneurysm. A blood vessel gave out, just like that. The doctor said years of long hours, skipped meals, stress stacked on stress. A body can only carry so much weight before it breaks. So he couldn't even handle carrying a few sacks of rice? Part of me thought, see? Men's bodies crumble under pressure women endure daily. Pregnancy, jobs, childcare, everything. I wore it like a shield, even as doubt crept in. I caught myself waiting for him to just sit up, grumble about the bills, like nothing happened. Why didn't I feel anything? Wasn't I supposed to cry? I told myself, maybe this was strength. Women don't break. We carry on. But deep down, it felt less like strength and more like being hollowed out. The funeral was 3 days later. Small chapel, too many folding chairs, the smell of lilies, and bad coffee. Leo sat stiff in a borrowed suit, sleeves chewed raw. Mom came back, mascara heavy, voice soft like she'd rehearsed sad instead of felt it. She hugged Leo too long and squeezed my shoulder like that made up for years gone. I watched her dab her eyes while Oren the milk guy told me about Dad spotting him credit when trucks ran late. Hector said Dad once covered his rent when the bakery oven broke. Marla left flowers, said Dad never missed a promo order. Even Benny, the fridge tech, muttered, "Your old man kept everyone afloat on this block." And I just stood there, listening to strangers cry like he'd saved their lives. Leo whispered, "What happens now?" I didn't answer. Just felt the Eagle Mart keys heavy in my pocket, cutting into my palm. Just like that, almost conveniently, everything he carried became my burden. The first week after the funeral, I thought maybe I could juggle it, keep my barista shifts, and help with the store on the side. But reality kicked me in the teeth fast. I was already stumbling through opening Eagle Mart, running late, forgetting Leo's school stuff. Then the coffee shop manager called, said my schedule wasn't lining up. Too many last-minute call-offs, I almost argued, then stopped. Truth was, the store had already swallowed me whole. So I quit the barista job. Just like that, the only part of my life that felt young and normal, gone. Now it was Eagle Mart, or nothing. The next morning, Aunt Dee took me to Leo's school. The principal put her as emergency contact and listed me as temporary guardian for 30 days so I could sign and pick him up without drama. My first solo opening was a disaster. I overslept, showed up at 7:15, and regulars were already lined outside, arms crossed, muttering. I fumbled the keys, hit the wrong switch, half the lights, stayed off. Cash drawer wouldn't balance. I didn't know Dad kept an exact float, just the right amount of small bills, down to the dollar, so the books matched. I thought cash was cash. Now I was short, no idea why. Customers watched me sweat behind the register, acting like I was scamming them. Then the deliveries started rolling in. Hector the bread guy slammed crates on the counter. "Where's last week's check?" he asked. I blinked. "Check? Dad must have handled that. I thought bills were monthly." Hector sighed, muttered, "Your dad always had it ready." I scraped together the payment, already behind before the day started. Oren the milk driver showed up next, smiling until he saw the empty end cap where Dad used to stack his promo gallons. "Discount doesn't count without display," he said, almost apologetic. I hadn't even unloaded yesterday's delivery. Milk sweating in the cooler. He shook his head, told me Dad never missed one. All I could do was mumble an excuse and promise to fix it. Marla, the soda rep, dropped by too, pointed at the dusty shelves and said, "Your dad used to run promos, set up end caps. It boosted sales $40 easy." I stared at her like she was speaking another language. I thought Dad just signed for boxes, but no. He was negotiating, playing angles, building goodwill. I was already losing money I didn't even know existed. The bills started piling fast. Electric bills sky high. Those humming fridges ate power like crazy. Internet cut out one afternoon. POS system crashed. I had to hang a cash-only sign on the door. Customers groaned, half walked out. It felt like every decision was one step closer to collapse. The rent reminder came in too. Landlord mentioned Dad always used the grace period, but it ended in 5 days. 5 days, and I barely had enough to cover stock, let alone rent. At home, wasn't easier. Leo's school emailed, but it bounced. The account was tied to Dad's old store email. I missed the field trip form, had to sprint from store to school and back with a "Be Right Back" sign taped on the door. Customers were waiting when I returned, glaring like I'd robbed them of their time. Dinner that night? Chips and instant noodles from the shelves. Leo chewed his sleeves again, an old tic I hadn't seen in years. He didn't say it, but I knew. Dad would have made real food somehow. Week 2 hit harder. Heatwave rolled in, cooler died. Milk soured, sandwiches spoiled, $400 gone in one afternoon. Benny the fridge tech showed up, quoted $2,800 for a new compressor. I laughed, almost cried, told him no way. He shook his head and said, Dad used to barter. Haircuts from Aunt D, free coffee at closing. Me? I had nothing to trade, no goodwill built up. I was just another broke customer. Then shoplifting started. A teen slipped an energy drink into his pocket. I called him out, voice shaking. He laughed, said, "Call your dad." I froze. He walked out smirking while I stood there, heat rushing to my face. That's when it hit me. No one feared me, no one respected me. I wasn't Dad. Then came the margins lesson. I thought, just charge more. But when I ran the numbers, a $2.49 soda cost $1.89 landed. After card fees and shrink, profit was pennies. I told myself Dad must have been too dumb to fix it, too passive to fight back. All my life, I'd heard men hoard resources while women stretched pennies into meals, so how come the math looked like survival, not laziness? I shoved that thought down fast. Cash flow spiral came next. Missed 2 early morning deliveries because I overslept. Vendors stopped extending credit, switched me to cash on delivery. Now I had to pay up front, draining what little I had left. Felt like drowning in invisible debts I didn't even know existed. Through it all, small lifelines appeared. Hector leaned over the counter one morning, said quietly, "Pay half today, rest Friday." Your dad never stiffed me. Then he slid the bread across anyway. Made me feel like a child being handed candy out of pity. Benny came back one night after closing, brought a used compressor part, installed it for half price. Said, "Your old man kept coffee hot for every tech on this block." I nodded, throat tight, had no idea what to say. Aunt D showed up with sticky notes and a wall calendar. Wrote out vendors, bills, Leo in neat rows. Taught me Dad's envelope system, electric, rent, Leo, emergencies. Slipped $50 into emergencies while I watched. I wanted to believe it was clever, but part of me sneered. Like maybe if he'd been smarter, we wouldn't be here drowning in scraps and envelopes. I thought running a store was just selling chips. But goddamn, it was so much more work than I thought. He supposedly did this so I could dream, so Leo could be a kid, so even Mom could vanish without us collapsing. I wanted to scream at myself. My feminism told me men hoarded power. It never said they'd sometimes give themselves away just to keep the lights on. 3rd week hit me like a freight train. Evening rush, line at the counter, Leo in the back doing math homework. Then I saw it, a bright orange slip wedged in the mail stack. Shut off notice. Electricity due next morning, deposit plus balance. Dad always timed just right. I froze, tried to smile at customers like my chest wasn't caving in. If the power went, coolers died, milk spoiled, shelves useless. Eagle Mart would be a tomb with snacks. I called the utility, put on my nicest woman in distress voice. "I'm his daughter, he just passed. Can you give me a week?" The guy on the other end didn't even pause. "We need money, not stories." I bit my lip, thanked him, hung up before my throat cracked. I tore through Dad's drawer after close. Ledger packed with due dates, tiny notes. Aaron net 7 chews. Pay rent fry. Leo lunch card, top up. Rows of careful handwriting, arrows, underlines. I scoffed out loud. Lists, that's all it was. Women have been making lists forever. Nobody calls it heroism. He wasn't a genius, just obsessive. Still, my stomach twisted, knowing I had no idea how to replicate it. And my brilliant idea? Go online. Dad never knew the power of social media, posted a reel. Running a store as a woman, the grind is real. Support small biz. Clips of me stocking chips, wiping counters. Comments flooded. Queen. You're so strong. Fire emojis. Likes stacked up, shares too. But at the register, 0 difference. Nobody walked in saying, "Saw your reel? Here's cash." Pity likes don't pay utilities. Plan B. Move lottery tickets fast. Tried offering scratches at a discount. Felt clever, like a hustler. Next morning, the lottery rep stormed in, red vest, clipboard. That's breach of contract. One more stunt and I pull the terminal. My heart stopped. If they yanked it, traffic would die. Half the regulars came for tickets, not groceries. I stammered some excuse. He walked out, shaking his head. I told myself Dad should have renegotiated years ago. Maybe he was too scared, too complacent. Maybe this was his fault, not mine. Late that night, scrolling payday loan apps, my thumb hovered over accept terms. Fees insane, interest criminal. I almost clicked anyway, whispering, if Dad had been smarter with money, maybe we wouldn't be here. But I closed it, threw the phone on the counter, stared at the humming cooler like it was mocking me. Thought that was the low point. Then came the robbery. The teen from week 2, the one who pocketed an energy drink, came back. Brought 2 friends this time, stood by the counter, loud, laughing, shoving each other. I tried to ignore it, ring up customers, but my hands shook. Then one of them snatched the tip jar, bolted for the door. I yelled, stepped out from behind the counter. Mistake. They shoved past, laughing, glass rattling, as the door swung shut. I stumbled, smacked my shoulder on the rack, fell halfway into a pile of chip bags. Leo saw everything from the back, his face pale, mouth open, like he'd seen me murdered instead of robbed. He whispered, Dad wouldn't let that happen. And I wanted to scream at him, at the world. No one respected me. Not customers, not vendors, not punks with sticky fingers. I wasn't Dad. I was prey. I called 911, voice shaking. Officer came, asked for details, scribbled notes, looked me dead in the eye, and said, You need cameras. You're the owner now. The word landed like a slap. Owner. Not daughter, not girl trying to survive. Business owner. I nodded, pretending I was strong, but inside my chest felt hollow. I thought ownership would feel like empowerment, like proof I didn't need any man. Instead, it felt like standing alone in a storm with no umbrella. But no. That's just part of it, right? I told myself I needed to be strong, like all women are. That night, I sat in the dark after closing, counted out the drawer, short again. Held the emergency envelope Aunt Dee had started, $50, sitting sad, inside. Looked at Dad's old thermos, empty, dented, smelling faintly of coffee. I thought about posting again, some rant about men hoarding power. But the words stuck in my throat. Because if Dad was hoarding, why did it feel like he'd spent himself dry just to keep us fed? I slammed the ledger shut, muttered, He should have planned better. But even as I said it, my voice cracked, like maybe I didn't believe myself anymore. All my life, I thought feminism armed me with answers. So maybe the cracks in my voice were just exhaustion, not doubt. But no, men crumble. Women adapt. This was just proof I was built stronger, even if it didn't feel like it.